Hi, gang. So we've got a great lineup for you today, and I'm going to have each of our authors, as we read, give you a little intro about themselves first. Then they're going to tell you about their book. Then they're going to do the reading. We'll do that with each of us. And then when we have some time left, we'll go to questions and comments, and we'll chat with each other and stuff like that. So our first one, I believe, is
Jenny Frame.
So Jenny Frame is not with us in person, but she did send a reading for us to partake in. So let's do her first. Here is Jenny Frame.
Hi, this is Jenny Frame, and I'm going to be reading from my new release, Royal Family, which is the fourth in the Royal Romance series. Chapter 1. Veronica Clayton moved gingerly from behind deep undergrowth to the cover of a large tree. Her heart and breath were steady, despite the exertion of tracking the target she was stalking. Clay's training as a police protection officer kept her emotions in check and her head clear. She was the best shot in the protection command. In fact, she'd always been the best marksman in every team she'd been in, from Army Cadets as a girl to police training and her first assignment to the firearms squad. Clay heard the low murmur of voices and then caught her target in her vision. She kept her weapon close to her side and edged around the tree trunk to get a better shot. She'd only need one. One opening and her target would be down. She raised her weapon and in a second, boom! There were screams followed by shrieks of laughter. Holly wiped snow from her jacket, and Princess Edwina, or Teddy as she was known, bounded up and down on the thick snowy ground. "Get her, Halls!" Teddy shouted. Holly shot her a glare. "I'm going to kill you, Clay." Clay gathered more ammunition from the snowy ground and ran out into the gardens of Sandringham Estate. The royal family were gathering to celebrate Christmas at Sandringham, the Queen's Norfolk Christmas retreat, in observance of an old tradition. Tradition was very important to the family, especially at Christmas, and this was a time they treasured. Clay laughed at Holly's threat. "You can try, but I'm too fast for you." Teddy started to lift snow and throw it in Clay's direction, but being only 3 years old, her missile didn't get very far. Holly shouted to Jack, one of the new members of the protection squad, to help them. After Beatrice, the Queen Consort, had her second child, Jack was placed under Clay's command to be an extra pair of eyes on the royal children. Clay got on really well with Jack and trusted him to help with the protection of Teddy and her 3-month-old baby sister, Princess Anna. Jack ran across the snowy garden at top speed and gathered up a big pile of snow. The Queen's dogs, Rex, Shadow and Baxter, chased around and barked loudly. Teddy and Holly chased after Clay as fast as Teddy could run on her little legs. But when Jack's snowballs hit Clay square in the back, she fell to her knees dramatically, as if she'd been shot. "I got her, Princess Teddy," Jack said in triumph. Clay played up her death scene as the princess and Holly hurried towards her. "I'm dying. You got me. Don't shoot." "We've no sympathy, Clay. We're going to get you, aren't we, Teddy?" Holly said. Teddy picked up handfuls of snow and threw them all over Clay as she sat on her knees in the snow. I got her, Halls." Teddy jumped up and down. "You sure did," Holly told her. Clay loved spending time with the Queen's children. She loved them like her own little sisters and would die to protect them. Being a protection officer meant she didn't get the Christmas holidays off work. But since her mother had died a few months ago, she didn't care. Her mother's sudden death left Clay with no immediate family, and the quiet loneliness of her own flat was too much to bear. So she threw herself into her job. Protecting these two important children was her life now, and the hustle, bustle and excitement of a royal family Christmas dulled the grief that she felt deeply inside. There was a lot of focus on the royal family at Christmas, and the protection team had to be on their toes. Despite Christmas being a private family time for most British families, the royal family had to be on display at this time of year, leading the nation in their celebrations. The snow rained down on Clay from above, and the dogs barked with excitement until she said, "I'm dead." She went still and feigned her death. The snow stopped and Teddy said, "You okay, Clay?" "Don't trust her, Teddy," Holly said. Just then, Clay made a grab for Teddy and she squealed. Clay held Teddy above her head. "I'm going to get you, Princess." This was her family now, and without her mum, this was the best way to spend Christmas Eve. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I love the background that she's got going there. I think that looks a little bit like Texas right now. I hear that it's snowing down there. So who do we got left here? So we've got M.A. Binfield, we've got Genevieve Mcclure, and I think that there are still a few people who may show up.
I'm gonna go, guys.
You're going to stay with us, Sandy? Are you going to read as well?
No, I'm just did my duty sharing Jenny with you. That was her first reading too.
Really?
So,
I had no idea she had that lovely accent, so that was an added bonus.
So yeah, if anyone in the chat roll is a Jenny Frame fan, please show her your love, send her an email, tell her how much you liked it, because that was her first reading. She's kind of sweet. Okay, you guys have fun.
Okay, see ya. All right, you two, we're going to roll the dice. Do either one of you want to volunteer to go first? Does it matter to you?
I'm easy. A card.
All right, then Genevieve, why don't you go first? What are you going to read from? To give us a little intro about you, who you are, what you write, and what you're going to read from, okay? All right, it's all you. I'm going to mute myself, so go for it.
Okay, I am Genevieve Mcclure. I've written 3 different fantasy romance novels now. My latest one is Thor, Daughter of Asgard. It's a polyamorous urban fantasy story that's somewhat of a magician style take of an adult version of YA novels. Let me see, just have the reading pulled up. And to set the scene, this is right when they first are confronted with the fact that they are, didn't actually summarize the story. Hannah and Emily are the reincarnations of Thor and Sif, Norse gods, and this is just when they are first confronted with that fact. "They're clearly delusional," Emily snapped. "That isn't enough of an answer." Hannah chewed on her lip, looking between Emily and the lunatics. "What alternative do we have? They're not hurting us, they're just confused. Let's prove them wrong and they'll leave us alone." It sounded like there was more to it, but Hannah apparently wasn't going to say, and Emily certainly wasn't leaving her alone here. "Fine, but if they kill us, it's your fault." Hannah shrugged. "I can live with that. Let's get drinking." Magni slid a chair over. He seemed reluctant to sit in the booth, maybe trying to give them some degree of space. It was a welcome change. "First things first, since your death, I'm the strongest living being in the universe. If you can even come close to me in might, then that should show you something." "Well, if I don't know how strong you are, that doesn't really tell me much." Hannah offered a cheeky grin. Emily stared. Had she run off and had a few dozen beers when she wasn't looking? "Very well. Look at that window." He pointed to a car on the street. The chair shrilly squeaked as he moved, heading outside. He stood next to the car, a perfectly normal sedan. Then it was suddenly several feet in the air in one of his massive hands. Hannah stared, her mouth hanging open. "That can't be possible. And they think I can do that? It's ridiculous." Emily blinked repeatedly, trying to wake herself up from this dream. The car's alarm started blaring as he set it down. He strolled back inside and took his seat again, a self-satisfied smirk on his lips. "I don't know why that thing is making that noise, but are you convinced? It hasn't cursed me, has it?" "Can we shut the alarm off?" A voice sounded from under a nearby table. "Okay." A man peeked up and pressed a button on a key fob, and the alarm ended with a chirp. There's no need to fear, Magni insisted. I intend no harm to anyone. Please, beer wench, come back out and serve. If I'm your mother, I raised you horribly, Emily spat back. This was met with a mighty laugh that echoed through the little establishment. Everyone, please, relax and enjoy your food and drink. I shall pay for all of this and any damage we cause. Producing a heavy cloth bag from inside his armor, he tossed it onto the counter. I believe that should cover everything. The bartender climbed up from behind the bar and untied the bag, causing a gold coin to spill out onto the ground. I'll have to ask my manager. Very well. Can I call them? Of course. There was a very good chance that he didn't know what phones were. The bartender pressed more than 3 buttons on his cell phone, so he likely wasn't calling the cops. He probably just wanted that tip. Emily could hardly blame him. She was tempted to grab that fallen coin. How do you want to test my strength? Hannah asked. I'm not really a fighter. Now those are words I never thought I'd hear my father say. Another laugh bellowed forth from his belly. Modi, sit and watch while I show you the truth of Mimir's words. This is our father. I would know those eyes anywhere. I trust you know how to arm wrestle? Emily leaned back, rolling her eyes in disbelief. Somehow it always came back to arm wrestling in this bar. Hannah nodded slowly. I have no idea why I'm going along with this. You're lucky I love arm wrestling and drinking. That's our father, Magni said. With a groan, Hannah thudded her elbow on the table and held her hand out, staring into the gray eyes of the man who claimed to be their son. There was no way she could win. She couldn't lift a car, but at least she could prove them wrong, and then they'd stop harassing them, right? Are you ready, Father? I'd be more ready if you stopped calling me that. He paused, as if only now realizing how weird that must sound. Then, do you have names? It would feel strange to call our parents such, but if that is your preference, I believe we can accommodate you. Can we not, Modi? He nodded. We can, brother. I'm Hannah, she said, her hand already extended. Are we seriously doing this? Emily asked. These guys keep showing up places. It's just all too ridiculous. I need answers. Groaning, she shrugged. Fine. I'm Emily. Hannah, Emily, it's nice to meet you. Magni took Hannah's hand, his grip looking likely to crush the tiny girl's. Emily dared not breathe. I'm glad we can be civil now, Modi said. I wish we'd known this all from the beginning. It really is a pleasure to meet you, and I hope that we haven't offended you too gravely. No, it's okay, Hannah said, sounding far too eager for the little contest. Let's do this. Magni's face tensed, his lips trembling as his hand pushed against Hannah's. She didn't move, and she appeared as cheerful as she had a moment earlier. Hannah was weirdly strong, but this man had just lifted a car. Are you holding back? Hannah's voice was soft, almost scared, with a strength that reassured Emily. Whatever was going on, no matter how crazy this was, at least Hannah would be here, and having a super strong girlfriend was hardly the worst fate in the world. A little, he admitted, his voice sounding strained. He looked to be redoubling his efforts, his veins popped out on his head and arm, and sweat beaded on his forehead. Hannah met his strength, letting out a chuckle as she leaned in, gritting her teeth. Emily's annoyance gave way to staring at her girlfriend's biceps with undisguised lust. Well, I am too. Emily swallowed, not believing the words. She really wasn't struggling? This wasn't possible. Modi's hand thudded on the table, the wood splintering under them as Hannah jumped to her feet and cheered. He stared at her, his jaw dropping. But you don't even have your belt. What a weird response to having your ass kicked, she laughed. Does this mean I have lightning powers?
Very nicely done. Very nicely done. When you stopped and I was like, no, what happens? Keep going.
Uh-huh.
That was great. And that is from
Thank you.
Thor, Daughter of Asgard. Is that the name of the
Yes,
book?
that is.
Is it a series or no? Is that part of a series or no?
Not yet.
Okay. In your head, is it a series?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like one. I was like, there's going to be more. There's going to be more than this. Awesome. That was great. Okay, Michelle, you want to go?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, thank you.
All right. Give us a little intro about you and then tell us about the book and give us a setup and then you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm Michelle Binfield. I write as M.A. Binfield. This is the book that I'm going to be reading from, if you could see it. Not This Time, which is my second romance novel published by Bold Strokes Books. It is, I guess, what you would call a second chance romance about two women that were in a band together, a girl band. And then they reconnect 5 years later. It's kind of sweet, sexy, a bit angsty, slow burny, kind of. They've been spending some time together and they're at a friend's beach house. The book's set in Miami, nice hot Miami summer. Here goes. I'd rather we went out together if you didn't mind. Sophie sounded a little unsure of herself. I mean, I've never ridden one before, and I know you'll think I'm a wuss, but I'd feel happier if we shared. Maddie looked at Sophie and smiled, and Sophie smiled back at her sweetly. She had no idea if Sophie knew how much her lack of courage had made her day. Come on then. Maddie took Sophie by the hand to the bigger blue machine and helped her get on it, showing her where to sit and where to put her feet. She slipped onto the seat behind Sophia. There wasn't a lot of room, and Maddie edged as far forward as she could, having no choice but to press herself against Sophie's back to wrap her thighs tightly around Sophie's. As she settled into position, Maddie felt Sophie take a big breath in, and then, unmistakably, gently lean back into Maddie while she let out the breath. For a long moment, they sat there, closer than they'd been in many years, their bodies pushed up against one another, the life jackets between them acting as a barrier, making it seem like what they were doing was not as intimate as it was. Maddie's thighs being wrapped around Sophie's meant her now aching centre was next to Sophie's ass. It was completely intoxicating to be so close to her. As Sophie dropped her hands from the handlebars to her side, her forearms rested briefly on Maddie's thighs, and the feel of Sophie's skin on hers made Maddie flush. Don't let me fall off. Sophie took both of Maddie's arms and used them to pull Maddie even closer. Maddie closed her eyes, letting herself enjoy the moment, letting her cheek rest against the back of Sophie's head. She felt like her body was made of electrical impulses, snapping and firing and sending currents through her body. Yet, at the same time, she felt completely content. She had the urge to tell Sophie that was how she felt, in a way that old Maddie never would have done. But instead, she pulled herself together, freed her arms from Sophie's, turned on the engine and gripped the throttle. She leaned back and untied the rope, tying it to the jetty before speaking into Sophie's ear. Put your hands up on the grips and hold on tight. Maddie's voice was raspy, and she hoped that Sophie wouldn't realise that it was because she was aroused. She tried to clear her head and concentrate on the machine, on taking Sophie out for a spin. She wanted them to have fun together like they used to, before it all got so damn difficult. Ready? Another excuse for Maddie to put her lips close to Sophie's ear. Pressed against her, Maddie again felt Sophie's deep intake of breath. Then Sophie nodded, and Maddie released the throttle and revved the engine. Sophie moved her hands from the handlebars and placed them over Maddie's. She got them moving, increasing the throttle and the speed as soon as they got into deeper water. She was rewarded with a squeal from Sophie and a thump on her thigh, which she soon learned was Sophie's way of telling her to slow down. If her thighs weren't going to hurt enough from the effort of controlling the jet ski, they were going to be bruised from Sophie's persistent punching. They travelled the length of the beach, turning for home when they reached the inlet. And when they tipped over close to the jetty, as Maddie was trying to bring them alongside while going too fast, they both tumbled into the water, spluttering and shrieking. Maddie had not felt this happy in a really long time. As Maddie finished tying up the jet ski, Sophie swam up behind her and jumped on her shoulders, dunking her under the water and then swimming away laughing. Maddie came to the surface with a splutter and saw Sophie trying to pull herself up out of the water a few yards away. She was there in 3 strokes, just in time to pull Sophie by the legs back into the water. She now had Sophie trapped against the jetty, an arm on either side of her shoulder, their faces barely 6 inches apart. The look on Sophie's face as she stared at Maddie's mouth was one Maddie had seen 100 times before. And in that moment, Maddie understood that Sophie was as turned on as she was. If she gave in to her own desire to let her lips press against Sophie's, the kiss would not only be thrilling, but it would be exactly what Sophie wanted. The realization surprised her. She leaned in slightly and watched Sophie's eyes widen, felt her inhale deeply. She dropped her arms into the water and slipped her hands around Sophie's waist. She wanted to strip off their life jackets and pull Sophie to her so she could feel Sophie's breast pushed against her own, the idea causing a pulse of arousal between her legs. When Sophie leaned in, Maddie tilted her head, bringing her mouth closer to Sophie's, seeing the intensity of her own desire reflected back at her in Sophie's eyes. The huge splash in the water next to them made them spring apart, soaking them both with spray. Maddie took a second to recover her senses and realised that the splash had come from the spare jacket, now floating next to them in the water. Looking up along the jetty, Maddie saw Daya standing a few yards away, hands on hips, making it very clear she was the one who had thrown it. It was as if Daya had thrown a bucket of cold water over them both, and whatever had been about to happen a second before, Sophie and Maddie now both looked at each other a little awkwardly. "After you," Sophie said, indicating that Maddie should climb up onto the jetty first. Maddie did just that, and then reached a hand back to help Sophie pull herself up out of the water. They both took off their life jackets, picked up their clothes, and walked shyly towards Daya, like teenagers busted by their parents for making out on the porch. Except they hadn't even had the chance to do anything. Maddie tried to feel grateful to Daya for saving her from fucking things up with her out-of-control libido, but she couldn't. The desire to kiss Sophie had been so strong. Her mind scrambled as her body reacted with arousal to the idea of it. She made a mental note to spend less time with Sophie when she was in a bikini. Next to her, Sophie whispered behind her hand, obviously not wanting Daya to hear. "That was fun, Matt." Maddie nodded in agreement. "And I mean all of it, not just the part where you agreed to climb out first so that I could get a great view of your butt in that bikini." She offered Maddie a cheeky wink and stepped away before Maddie could react. She watched her walk back along the jetty with Daya, feeling as confused as ever. It wasn't just her own feelings she was confused by. Sophie was definitely not acting like someone with a long-term boyfriend. That's me.
Yay! Again, I want you to keep going. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's happening.
Yeah.
All right, so we will come back to you guys with some questions. Hopefully when I finish, I'm going to read a little bit. I was hoping that maybe Amanda would be here, but she must have had something come up. So I'm going to read to you guys from my current release, which is called 16 Steps to Forever. I'm going to read kind of a little ways into the book, not too far, but a little ways. Our main characters here are Brooke and Macy. And they're at the point in the story where they've both realized that they kind of have an attraction for each other, but nobody's really made a move. They haven't had a date. They've been out to a bar together for drinks after work, but they were interrupted by somebody else. So that ended up really not being just the two of them. So Brooke has adopted a stray cat, and she has asked Macy to come over and give her some pointers on having a cat. And so now they are at Brooke's house and sort of trying to figure out how to deal with each other. Thank God for cheese and crackers, because was there something in the air at Brooke's place? An odd sense of anticipation was the only word Macy could come up with that even remotely fit how she'd been feeling since she arrived. She felt wide awake, on alert, crazy aware. There was a subtle fluttering low in her body, one that became less subtle the closer Brooke was to her. It had been a long time since she'd been that affected by somebody, and she was trying really hard not to dwell on it. Brooke returned from the kitchen with 2 glasses of Diet Coke. She slid Macy's toward her, then quickly took it back. "You're not going to spill this, are you? Should I put it in a plastic cup?" "Oh, a funny girl, I see. Listen, I can't make any promises. I have no control over that kind of thing." Brooke relinquished the soda with a grin. "I guess I'll have to take my chances." They stood there quietly, both admiring the cat. And after a moment or two, Macy said, "He's going to get a complex if we keep staring at him like this, you know. I would." "Me too," Brooke laughed. She pulled out one of the chairs and sat, and Macy followed suit. "So what made you leave Ohio? I mean, I know you got a job here, but why? I assume your family is still in Ohio?" Something passed over Brooke's eyes then. Those big, dark, sparkling eyes went dull for just a split second, and then she seemed to mentally shake herself. "They are, yeah. I was ready for a change." She glanced down at her glass, turned it in her fingers before adding, "I needed a change." Macy wanted to delve deeper. What was that phrase her grandma used to use? Something about still waters running deep. Macy never understood it until she got older, and now she sat next to somebody who she just knew was the epitome of that phrase. Brooke was calm and still and peaceful on the outside, But in that moment, somehow, Macy knew there was so much more beneath the surface. And good God, did she want to dive in head first. But she also got the distinct impression that Brooke had lines, limits. You know, that was really nosy of me, Macy said, waving a hand. I'm sorry, just ignore me. No, it's fine. I don't mind. Brooke's lack of eye contact said otherwise, so Macy went in a different direction. And how have you been settling in? Okay? Brooke's manner eased, which made Macy relax a bit. This was apparently a safer topic of conversation. I'm doing pretty well, Brooke said, reaching for a hunk of cheese. She nibbled a corner. I mean, I'm all unpacked. I have a new cat, for God's sake. A lot of progress happening here. A sense of humor. Macy didn't expect one based on the first time she'd met Brooke, but it was there, lingering just under the surface of her very put-together exterior. Tons of progress, Macy agreed. Have you met many new people? Outside of work, I mean? Brooke tipped her head one way and then the other. It's a little harder when you're over 30, you know? She gave a slight shrug, sipped her Diet Coke. While I do love a good night of dancing, I'm really not a go out to the bars kind of girl. An idea struck then, like a tap on Macy's shoulder. She shoved a piece of cheese on a cracker in her mouth and nodded to give herself a little time to absorb what she was thinking. She chewed slowly, swallowed, sipped her soda. Finally, she looked up at Brooke and the question slipped from her lips. What are you doing tonight? Eyes that were no longer dull widened slightly. Me? Tonight? Nothing. Why? Well, I was thinking. Uh-oh. Oh, more funny stuff. You're on a roll. A blush, a mischievous grin. What was Macy going to do with this girl? I was thinking that a good way for you to meet new people without going to a bar is to attend a dinner party. Okay. My friend Lucas and his husband Sam are throwing one tonight, and I'm going, and I'd really love it if you'd come with me. She cleared her throat. Was she really doing this? They're super nice guys. Lucas has been my bestie for years, and I love him to bits, and I'm not sure how often you've been to dinner parties thrown by gay men, but there's nothing quite like them. She smiled, but it felt a little weird on her face. She hoped that didn't show. Did she sound uncertain and a little bit freaked out? Because she absolutely was. She didn't need to be. Brooke's face lit up like the sun had suddenly come out. Oh my God, I'd love that. I have a weird mental aversion to sitting home alone on a Saturday night. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's not, but I get it. Totally. And while that was true, that she did understand not wanting to be home on a Saturday night, Macy didn't subscribe to that. In fact, she kind of loved being home on a Saturday night. A good movie, animals surrounding her. It was her idea of bliss, but not tonight. Tonight, she was going to a dinner party with a beautiful woman. What in the world was happening? They ironed out details of what time Macy would pick Brooke up before she gathered her things and crossed the room to bid Rorschach goodbye. I hope I see you again soon, she whispered so only the cat could hear. Then she kissed the top of his head and turned to Brooke. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you in a little while. You will. Brooke opened the front door for her and Macy tried to take in the sight without looking like that's what she was doing. She was used to Brooke in suits, not a bad thing at all, and the jeans on the day of the cafe, but Saturday at home Brooke might be her favorite. The leggings, the oversized shirt, the messy bun, barely any makeup. She looked cozy and inviting, and she smelled amazing, like almonds and vanilla and everything inviting, and she silently called to Macy like some kind of a siren. It was weird and unexpected and freaky and all kinds of sexy. She had to get out of there. A quick goodbye, a wave, and she all but fled Brooke's townhouse. Once in her car and out of the driveway, she called up the phone app. Call Lucas, she ordered. She barely let him finish his greeting before she blurted, help me, I did something crazy. Again? She could almost see him rub his hands together in anticipation. Picture his face as he smiled with glee. Excellent. Tell Uncle Lucas all about it. And that is from 16 Steps to Forever. Sorry about the cameo from the cattail. Thank you, Michelle.
You can keep going. We've got spent plenty of time because we're missing a person.
Lots of time. Genevieve, come back. So I would like to know, let's start out with, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box yet, but I will say to our audience, if you've got questions for anybody about their books, about themselves, about, you know, their opinions on anything in life, just throw those in the Q&A box. I want to know, first of all, Genevieve, I want to know where your idea came from to write about Norse gods and such, because that's, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. So tell me how this develops in your head, and then how do you put that on paper?
Well, I mostly write fantasy stuff based on actual mythology anyway. Sorry. I elbowed him in the head.
I need a cat. I don't have a cat. I feel
Oh, and I forgot to show the cover to the book.
There we go. Perfect.
yeah.
But I'm sorry, Grendel. I did not mean to elbow you in the head. Speaking of Norse mythology, Grendel.
So what made you decide you're going to make this into a book?
Well, originally I had actually been planning on doing it as like, well, a whole bunch of different things. I'd originally planned on it being in the same world as my other books, being kind of like a Norse mythology take on Love Actually. Then I wanted it to be more of like a pulpy series of short stories, and then I started writing it and just it completely evolved into its own thing. And yeah.
And the rest and the rest is history.
I suppose.
And Michelle, what about you? I mean, you're setting this in Miami. You're obviously not American.
No, I've never even been. Can you believe it?
You've never. So that's interesting to me. So how do you write about something it's not even like it's a state away?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, we don't have ocean in Wolverhampton for sure. Maybe it's a bit of wish fulfillment. I did a lot of research. I talked to people, obviously, about some of the neighborhoods and food. I found out a lot about Cuban food. Wow. There's a big, obviously, Cuban community in Miami. It kind of inspired by girl bands I've loved over the years. This sort of notion that two people in a girl band would be in some kind of relationship and no one would know. No one would ever let you know. No one would tell you because it would be sort of forbidden in the way that works. So it was inspired by that. But Miami was just fun. I wrote it in Porto in Portugal. I took a couple of months off work. I was really lucky, and it was hot and it was summer. And I just didn't want to write a sort of winter London sort of book. I felt like writing it in a sunny place. So yeah, that was one.
Do you feel like, and this question can go to both of you, is it easier for you to write in a particular season if it is that season? Because I'm like you are, Michelle. Right now, the book that I am writing is set it starts in October. So I know that pretty soon I'm going to be in the dead of winter, and I'm in the dead of winter now. So it's kind of the same, but it would be hard for me to write beach scenes while there's 5 feet of snow outside. I mean, I can do it. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's something about the mindset. And it's a little easier when you're surrounded by cold to write about being cold and having a fire going. Do you guys find the same thing, or?
I don't think that I really do that. Like I know for Thor, I actually wrote the beach scene in Hawaii in the middle of winter.
That's cool. And I would imagine maybe it's a little bit of a getaway then in that kind of case.
Yeah.
Like mentally transport yourself there. So then it was easier for you, Michelle, right? To write Miami scenes while you're on a sweltering beach in Portugal?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it just fitted for some reason. It was probably accidental, but actually it worked for me. It was fun for that reason, actually. Yeah, I mean, I could have set it in Portugal, but it would have been difficult, the language and all the rest of it. So I just transplanted it somewhere warm. And one of my, I think one of the girl bands that I'm aware of, I think a couple of the people are from Miami. I think it lodged in the back of my head somehow, that would work, kind of. But yeah, it was fun.
So I don't know either one of you guys very well. Tell me how you fell into writing. Tell me how you decided you were going to try your hand at your first book. Genevieve, you go first.
Okay. I just couldn't really avoid it. I just found myself I kept doing it. It kept happening. I actually tried not to a few times and then just ended up writing even more.
Michelle, what about you?
I guess I'm a bit of a cliche. I've always written. I remember as a kid, I couldn't sing. They wouldn't let me be in the choir. I was that bad, really bad. So,
they didn't even let you in. Like,
unless my memory is false, I think I was the only kid that couldn't go to choir for an hour. And I used to stay behind and write stories. And then when people got back from choir, I would like tell them my story. I think they were like detective stories or something lame. And so I wrote, I've got like so many unfinished novels, and just work got in the way and life gets in the way. And then I wanted to take some time off work because I hated my job. And I thought I need a reason. So I told everyone at work I was going to write a book. And so I had to, because it would have looked bad if I went back to work. So that was it, really. That was the impetus for writing the first one. And I sent it off, just sent it off to Bold Strokes Books, because I'm not just saying it, but all my favourite authors were Bold Strokes. I thought, let me try. So
Right.
yeah, it's a bit random. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. It's funny that you say that you hated your job, because I was in sales for almost 20 years before I started full-time writing. I was writing a little bit during that time, but it's funny because we had a friend several years back who is in HR, and we were at a party at her house, and she pulls out these cards where it's like a personality test, and you take the test and it tells you your ideal job and the job that you absolutely should not have. And I took the test, and my ideal job was novelist. I kid you not.
Wow.
And the job that at the bottom of the list for me was sales.
Oh.
So I decided then and there that I really needed to work to switch those. And I did.
You did, yeah.
But it's so funny that, something you're meant to do, you can't necessarily, I mean, writing's not, you don't just fall into writing. It's a very slow process. Somebody in the chat bar wants to know what lesbian genre was your first writings in? So did you guys, like Genevieve, did you start in fantasy, or have you written something else?
Yeah, it was still fantasy. It was paranormal romance for my first one.
Okay, and Michelle, what about yours?
I'm just dreadfully, ridiculously romantic. There was no way I was going to write anything other than lesbian romance. It's the books that I read and the escapism for me. Anything, rom-coms, lesbian romance, but right. I couldn't write anything else.
All right, so I have a question for each of you from Mary Pardo. Genevieve, how or where or both did you study Norse mythology?
Well, for the first book, I mostly just read through the entirety of the Prose Edda. I've since also read the Poetic Edda. I also read another book on Norse mythology as well then, and have since looked into further ones, and I've consulted a bunch with a Norse pagan, and had them look over the entirety of Thor originally. And they've even now, since coming out as non-binary, named their middle name after the non-binary character in my book.
Awesome.
Wow. I'm scared you're going to ask me about how I got into reading Norse mythology.
She wants to know if you have a favorite girl band. She wants to know if you have a favorite girl band.
Oh, thank goodness. I can answer that one. All of them. Oh my God, all of them. I'm a Spice Girls girl. I'm that kind of age. But I mean, Sister Sledge, wonderful. 70s, all those Pointer Sisters, fantastic girl bands, Destiny's Child. And then Little Mix. I think I cried when Little Mix won the X Factor or whatever it was. I was pulling for them so hard. They're like a British girl band, if you don't know who they are. I don't know if
well, it's funny because I did not know who they were until I started with my spin classes, and they use a lot of their music in spin class.
Yeah, they're pretty
so
cool.
I'm like downloading them all the time.
Yeah, I think I was about 40 at the time, so I had no excuse for crying when they won, but I did. So yeah, I'm at all of them actually.
I was a Go-Go's. Speaking of romance, I was a huge Go-Go's fan.
Oh yeah, of course. There's so many if you think about it. Yeah, girl bands make the world go round. Yeah.
They do, right?
Mm.
Okay, another question from the Q&A. Have either of you written any fan fiction? What fandom are you in? Anyone, jump in.
Not really.
No.
I mean,
Genevieve, have you written any fan fiction or no?
Not in quite a while. I've been in a few, most of which are quite embarrassing.
Well, I found that fan fiction is a good way to get I found it a good way to learn how to write, basically, because I wrote Xena fan fiction, I wrote some X-Files fan fiction, I wrote some ER fan fiction. I haven't written fan fiction in a very long time, although I will read occasional Rosolian Isles because I love them. But I found it was a great writing exercise because you already know the characters. You don't have to worry about character development. You can focus on everything else, your writing style, your setting, your dialogue, all of that stuff, because you already know these people, and it makes the writing a little bit easier. So I kind of found it to be a great writing exercise, for lack of a better phrase. Let's see. How did you all choose Bold Strokes as your publisher, or did they pick you? So I will let both of you. Michelle, how about you? How'd you get here?
Well, I think I mentioned sort of before. I just didn't. They were the publisher that I knew the best. I'd read liked a lot of Bold Strokes books. So when I wrote that first manuscript, I just sent it. I didn't know what I was doing. I said it was 50,000 words too long. I feel very bad for the editor that I had to get hold of that first manuscript. It had all sorts of taboo things in it that wouldn't get published. I literally had no idea. I did that thing where I just wrote it and sent it and just hoped. And then I remember getting an email from them. I think I've been out. I don't think I was drunk, maybe a little tipsy. And I opened an email because in England it would have been, I don't know, 11:30 or something. And it was work time in New York to say that they were interested in the manuscripts. I couldn't ring anyone to tell them. And I was so excited, but because it was the night time. And I think I rang my friend in Seattle, who's a teacher. I think I caught her in the middle of a class or something. It had been like 3 PM. And said, oh my God, they're going to publish my book. So I kind of chose, but yeah, they definitely picked me. And I'm very grateful. Yeah.
It's a fantastic story. Genevieve, how about you? How'd you get to Bold Strokes?
I had already read a few of our books by then, but I looked into like the top 50 selling lesbian novels on Amazon and saw the publishers for about 40% of them were Bold Strokes, and the rest were either small publishers or independent. So I decided to go with them, and I sent in my first manuscript, and it was accepted.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Like I said earlier, I don't know the two of you very well. I think I've met you both like in passing, and Michelle, I think we've hung out like in a giant group of people, but I don't know either of you. So tell me what a typical writing day is for you. If you have a day job and you write at night, if you write during the day, tell me what is a typical writing day for you. Michelle, go ahead.
Well, I work at home. I'm kind of lucky. I'm self-employed. So I was a sort of wage slave for a really long time. I left about 18 months ago, a job I'd had for a really long time. So now I work at home. I try and parcel out days when I can write and days when I work. It doesn't always work that way, but I try and sort of squash all my meetings and all my work into 3 or 4 days, and then I give myself a day. At the moment, I'm just finishing a manuscript, my 3rd novel. It's overdue. Slightly. So I'm trying to fit that in wherever I can, just the editing of that. But usually I'll try and give myself I need like a run at it. I'm a kind of a writer. I can't come home from work and do it. I found that really hard when I was working, but now I have whole days, whole weekends. It's possible, more possible for me, I think. Awesome. I need to immerse myself in it a bit, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Genevieve, how about you? What's a typical writing day for you?
Oh, that entirely depends. Sometimes I manage like just half an hour of writing just throughout the day. Other times I'm writing like 10 hours a day, just constantly. It just really depends on what the mood has hit me.
Mm-hmm. So do you work better in the morning or in the evening? I know you can't necessarily do one or the other, but which do you prefer if you had a choice?
Mostly at night, but I mean, I've honestly either night or morning, but nothing in between.
Okay, that makes sense. And you're not a person who's gonna like, if you're writing at 10 at night, are you gonna write straight through until 3 in the morning or no?
Absolutely.
Really? Oh, I'm so jealous. I wish I could do that. I write in like spurts. And my scenes are fairly short, so I can go from scene to scene to scene. But I can't do hours at a time. I read stories about people who are like, and I was writing for hours and I woke up and I hadn't eaten in 36 hours. And I can't. Yeah.
My first novel that was published here, I wrote in 12 days.
What? Oh my God. I think you're a robot. Now I'm starting to.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Wow.
What is your favorite piece you've written and why? Katie LeClaire would like to know this. Michelle, go ahead.
I actually, it's like having children, isn't it? You're not supposed to pick between them. And I haven't got many books, so it's not going to be hard for me to answer. Not like you, Georgia. It'll be a harder one for you. I hope you'll answer that question. I think that this book, I'm really proud of it. I think it's a better book than the first one. The first one is my first, and it's like my baby or whatever. And I sat with it for so long, it was for years. I find bits of it like on a laptop or in a folder that's like 2011 or something like that. Whereas this one I wrote in a short period of time, and I think that my craft has been improved by the support I've had at Bold Strokes and the editing and the advice that I've had. So I think it's a better written book. So yeah, I like it, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Genevieve, what's your favorite thing that you've written and why?
Well, I don't think my favorite book that I've written is out yet, but
is it coming? Or?
I'm not actually sure yet.
Okay.
Well, I have to wait and see. But for my favorite that I've written so far, either Olivia, because it's the only story I've actually written that has a character that is based on me, or possibly Thor, because it's just what I've really been wanting to write the whole time. Like, poly stuff, Norse mythology, actually getting to do some more fight scenes.
All right, so we have 2 minutes left. So what I want each of you to do is to tell us what you are working on next. Not the one that will tell me give me a refresher on what you just read from that's available now, or I think next month. And then tell me what the next thing you're working on is. Michelle, go.
So this book that's out now, it came out in December, is not this time, just a reminder. That's the one that's set in Miami about the girl band. And the book that I'm about to finish, which is my third, which is out in August 21 this year, is called Never Be the Same. And I'm just putting the finishing touches to it.
And give me a quick synopsis of it.
It's a sort of story about some TV stars who come to London, and that they're on a promotional tour, and they have a driver, a kind of uptight, sexy butch driver, and there's sort of chemistry between one of them and the driver, and lots of hurdles along the way. It's been fun to write, actually. Yeah.
That sounds fun. Genevieve, what did you read from? Is it out, or is it coming out next month? And then what's your next project?
Well, I read from Thor, Daughter of Asgard. It came out this month.
Okay.
And do you mean what's my next book that's coming out, or my book that I'm currently writing?
Both.
My next book that's coming out is called Fae Tale. It's another paranormal romance, because of course it is. And it's about a Laume, a type of Lithuanian fae, and deals extensively with Lithuanian culture, because I have a lot of family from there and just wanted to get back to my roots and write just a lighter, fluffier story.
Okay.
And then the story that I'm writing right now is, of course, another paranormal romance. And it's...
I'm sensing a pattern.
And it's about a swan maiden and a selkie that end up falling in love, but it uses... It's largely an examination of how marginalized groups are fetishized.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
I have 16 Steps to Forever, which is out now. It came out in December. Next up is called The Secret Poet, which is sort of a modern day take on Cyrano de Bergerac, with a woman who is helping her brother to woo a woman that she finds herself attracted to. And I'm currently working on the second book in a series, in the Swizzle Stick Romance series, called On the Rocks.
Wow.
Is that right? Yes. So we are out of time, you guys. Thank you so much for making this easy for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our audience attendees. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Georgia. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.